Hey guys, and welcome to another video. So today I'm going to be reviewing the book called Searching for Peace by Jessica Ashley. And it's the second book in the Coastal Hope series. They're not in any order and they're a series of standalones, but I am reading them in like chronological order. So yeah, it's a series of Christian romantic suspense, or Christian military romantic suspense novels. And I enjoyed the first book, which I also did a review of, so I'll have that here as a card. That one was called, oh my god, I can't even remember the name of it. I'm so tired. Pages of Promise. That was book 1. So this is book 2, Searching for Peace. So, basically the premise of the series is that these military guys, these army guys who went through this really intense situation, this deployment together, they eventually, now that they're not deployed anymore, they're back in their hometown and they started this security company. And so the main character, the main guy in this book, Elijah, is a side character in book 1, so we kind of already get to know him. And in this one, this old woman named Edna dies, and his parents were killed. He was raised by his grandmother, and his grandmother died, and so he's gone through a lot of grief. And so at one point he started helping Edna a lot, like around the house and stuff, and she was like her husband's dead and stuff like that. She doesn't have any family. And so she kind of like adopted him like a grandson, and he grew to love her like a grandmother over the 3 years that he knew her. And she dies, and so he's grieving for her. And her granddaughter, who was never around for her, who was not there for her when she was, for anything that she had gone through, not when she got sick and started dying and all that stuff. So her granddaughter's at the funeral, and he hates her granddaughter because in his mind this woman never came to see her grandmother. And then from her perspective, she sees him as this guy who had been mooching off her 70-year-old grandmother. And so they hate each other, but the grandmother left her house in their name as co-owners, and they can't do anything with it until they can agree what to be done with it. On top of that, there's this secret, and it's causing the suspenseful plot line to happen. So immediately when I started reading this, I had finished the first book and didn't know what else to read. And so I finished that book and I didn't know what book to start. And so that's when I started this one that same night. So it's only been a couple of days. And immediately it opened up with the funeral and the feelings of grief and stuff. Both Elijah and the granddaughter, her name is Andy, both of them describing the grief was really, it hit close to home with me. I lost my grandmother several years ago now. I think it was 2019, I think, actually. Yeah, it was 2019. So a lot of it was really accurate, and a lot of the things hit really close to home. There's one scene where Andy is in the house clearing out her grandmother's stuff, and even though it's been a lot longer since my grandmother passed, like we just recently did that this year, went through some of her stuff. So it's done in a really realistic way. And you know, a lot of people who don't know much about Christians may not know that we actually do go through grief. Just because we, are going to see each other in heaven again doesn't mean you don't miss the person and know that you're not going to have any more earthly memories with them. So it's still a grief process and everything. And so immediately I was drawn into the story just because of how relatable it was, and I felt for both characters, Elijah and Andy. And I really liked the enemies to lovers set up in a realistic way, because they made assumptions about each other, the worst assumptions about each other, and hated each other for that. And it set up this intriguing romantic plot line where they had a lot more to overcome. And to me, it hooked me a lot more than the first book, which was a 4-star read for me. So I was immediately intrigued. And for me, the really suspenseful story plots in this book was really, really intense. I would say this one, if you divided the whole story into the beginning and then the ending, and then you have the middle, and the middle, if you divided the middle into 2 parts, you have the part that's kind of more closer to the beginning, and then you have the part of the middle that's more closer to the ending. I would say the beginning and the first part of the middle are really, really good and really, really strong. And I would say the second half of the middle that's closer to the ending ending, did start to slow down in the sense that it focused a lot more heavily on the romance than it did the suspenseful plotline. And when there were suspenseful plotline moments, they were very, very intense and very, like, there were several times that I could not stop reading and I would binge read. And there were also a lot of times when I thought, this is going to be the only book that this is the closest book that will ever come to my own writing for myself. And that's not an arrogant thing. It's just like, I write what I want to read. And so therefore my writing, whether it's good or bad or whatever, is catered to what I like to read. And therefore it's hard to find something that's exactly done the way that I would. And so several times when I was reading this book, I thought, this is going to be the closest book that will ever be close to what I would do in a modern day, like, military romantic suspense. I would say for me, the author, and I noticed this with the last book, she doesn't describe things very well. She did do better in this book where the characters, certain traits were like repeated in certain places where it reminded you, oh, okay, yeah, they have, you know, whatever eye color or this or that. But there were still instances where there were gray areas for side characters, or sometimes in dialogue, I can't picture like what they're doing in the conversation because you'll just have lines of dialogue. And for any writers out there who may not know that, like, a lot of people do it. It's more I don't know if it's my personal thing, but to me it's not good to just have lines of dialogue without anything there. Describe something, give it a visual, have your characters move around and do some actions around the area that they're in so we can visualize things, because if not, the whole thing's just going to be gray and it's just like voices in your head speaking out of the darkness. You see what I'm saying? So there were not a whole lot of incidents of that, but there were several incidents of that happened. But less so than in the first book. So she did get better. And in this one, like the first book, she only described all of the characters like once, the first time they appeared, really. In this one, that it was repeated, so she is getting better. So that was my one critique. My biggest issue with this book is the ending, honestly. The latter half, like I said, had slowed down, focused more on the romance, and then we finally picked up suspenseful plotline stuff, and then all of a sudden it was like 300, in the 300 range. There was 360 pages or so, and so I thought there was gonna be like, you know, the suspenseful stuff and maybe a couple twists thrown in there, and there was a twist thrown in. There wasn't as many twists in this one as there was in the other one, but there still was a twist, like a couple twists, I would say. One of them I actually did call it, so I was pretty happy about that. So this one was not as surprising as the suspect in the last one. Like, who the suspect is to me was somebody that I had on a back burner, like it could be this person. I had several, but that was like one of the ones that had been on my mind, which doesn't bother me. But for me, the issue was the ending starts, and so typically you think, okay, something's gonna happen, and then the twist is gonna be revealed, and then there's gonna be like a secondary kind of like suspenseful, intense moment. But when the thing happened, and I'm doing this without spoilers, it's like bad guy reveals the whole plan and like all of the things, and then it goes to the other character, and then the bad guy, when the bad guy revealed the plan, revealed another twist for the other character, and so you go back to the other character, and all of a sudden that character puts the whole thing together, immediately knows where to go, what to do, how to solve things, and you expect the threat that the bad guy did on this character to come into play, and it does. But then when it goes back to the previous character that's with the bad guy, all of a sudden the other character is just there and the threat's over and the whole thing is like solved. And then the very next chapter we get like this happy little proposal, and like it's happy ending tied up with a little bow on top. So for me, what I'm trying to say is the ending felt rushed, and it felt like it was way too easily fixed, resolved, solved, and it was just too quick and easy, and just, you didn't really, like, the characters didn't really earn the happy ending, and they didn't really earn, you see what I'm saying, like it was a bit of a letdown for me as a reader. And like, for reference, I didn't know that was going to happen so quickly, because my book launched today, and so I had to do all kinds of marketing, and then I started writing, and I didn't finish my writing until like 12:45. So I sat down, because my husband doesn't get home until 1:30 in the morning, so I sat down to just relax and read for a while. I thought I still had plenty of the book to go, and I started reading, and it was just the ending, boom, we're done. And then it was like 40 pages of back matter, and it was just like, oh my god, this was so quick, so easy, so perfect, too easy. and I was honestly really, really disappointed. And it didn't help that I was looking forward to like reading for a while and expected there to be a lot more to the ending. So I would say that would be such a huge disappointment that for me, I was debating about giving this book 5 stars, which is hard because like it's so good. This book for me up until the ending is like one of the best, if not the best. I actually think I can say that this is the best contemporary romance that I've read, because I don't read very many of them. And for me, like military romantic suspense is like a really good type of contemporary to draw me in. Outside of thrillers, I'm not talking about psychological thrillers. So for me, contemporary romance, I should say. So for me, this is like the best military romantic suspense and the best like military romance and just contemporary romance in general that I have read. However, it's like my main genre that I really enjoy reading is fantasy, and so it doesn't really compare to like a 5-star fantasy read like Fourth Wing or the ACOTAR series or The Serpent and the Wings of Night. You know, those ones that I'm literally so addicted to. Anytime I'm not reading, I'm thinking about reading. So it's not that level of like obsession, which for me, those are my 5-star reads. So that's where my debate was, do I give it 5 stars even though it's not that same level as fantasy books that are 5-star reads, but it's like the closest that a contemporary book will ever have to being a 5-star read. But then the ending for me kind of knocked it down a bit, but it's still better than the last one, the first one, which I gave 4 stars to. So it has to be better. So I think for me, this book's gonna be between 4 and 4.5 stars. I'll just say 4.5 stars because there's no rating for that. Like if I had to give like a personal just whatever rating, it would be like 4.3 stars, but 4.5 officially, which you can't even do half stars on other places anyway, so I don't know if I'm going to round down or round up for this, but I will say I did enjoy it better than the first book. I really, really did love it and enjoy it. The ending was very disappointing and very rushed for me, and that would be my biggest critique. And for me, it's like, it normally wouldn't have been a big deal, except that like you want the ending to be good, so like for me, it was kind of like a bigger issue than like say some of the complaints I had about the first book that were minor issues that just, you know, that were like minor issues kind of piled up, whereas this one, it was like a bigger issue for me because I was very disappointed by the ending. And the bad thing is it kind of made me fall out of it, and I'm not as invested in the next couple as I was into them because their romance was like really, really good. And I would say I do like this was the first book, like I said, was more actually perfectly balanced between the romance and the suspense. This one kind of leaned a little bit more heavily into the romance, but that also meant that they had true emotional development with each other and also character development. And I would say the enemies to lovers romance kind of like got like it works as a plot line. I will say the themes that, like, I always love her Christian themes. I would say one theme that I'm seeing recurring in her books that is kind of I don't really care for is the fact that they fall in love so quickly. It's a little unrealistic. Like, these characters knew each other for like a week and then it was automatically like, oh, I love you. And I get that like you're going through a lot together, and in this case, like, they did actually work through the enemies to lovers part, but it's still like, when you think about it logically, that's so fast and it's not realistic at all. It's just like love at first sight. It's not really said, but it's kind of like implied, like so yeah, it's just not very realistic, which is weird because usually I would think that Christian romances focus more on like love, like you have to work for love and you have to work at it and it's a lot of effort and stuff, and God kind of leads you to each other and that sort of thing. So it's kind of an interesting thing for a Christian romance to do. And then the other minor complaint that didn't really, it's like I'm seeing a pattern to how she does the series, and that's the problem that I have with mainstream romances and other similar genres too, where they fit into this box, and the book is the box, and if you do a series of standalones, every story will be the same recurring thing. So I would say like some of the suspense plot lines, like the people are different, the scenarios are different, but some of the scenarios are similar. Like in the first book and in this one, the suspect throws a brick into a window and breaks the window, and it's this big deal. You know, in both of them, I'm seeing a pattern with who the suspects are, and like generally it's not who you think it is, and it's typically well, if you don't want spoilers, click away. But in both books, it's like not who you think it is. It's typically this unsuspecting female that has to connect with, that's always has this like little twist that's thrown in there. And toward the end of the book, something epic happens, the guy gets hurt, and then the girl gets kidnapped and the guy rescues her. So to me, you guys can come back now, spoilers over. So to me, I saw that pattern, and I hope that the third book breaks that pattern, because if not, I'm going to fall out of the series entirely, because I hate predictability. But I do know that, especially with romance in particular, people like the cookie cutter thing where it's the same thing, it's the same story pasted, it's just different characters, different plot, but different specific details, but the basic stuff is still the same, and I don't like that. And that's why I feel like my books are so weird, and maybe that's why they don't sell, but I don't like that typical like copy cut paste stuff. But overall, I did enjoy the book, and I read it really quickly, and I loved it more than the first book. I was so disappointed by the ending. I expected better. I hoped for better. And I really, like I said, for me, in order to keep me interested, the romance in the third one's going to have to be even better than this one. Otherwise, it's going to come off as lesser. And then she's going to have to start breaking the patterns that she's starting to do in her suspense plotline, because I'm picking up on the patterns after 2 books. And that means that book 3 is going to be pretty predictable, and I don't like that. So yeah, 4.5 stars. Have you read these books? Let me know what you think if you have. And just because I'm I try to be objective in my reviews for books. And so that means I list the positives and the negatives, and I try to be both. And for me, I think the positives were still outweighing the negatives in this book, and I still really like this author. And honestly, Christian military romantic suspense is really hard to find, and like non-spicy military romantic suspense is really hard to find. So I do want to shout out the author again, Jessica Ashley, and make that known. And I do suggest that you guys read it if you really enjoy romance, because it's especially if you don't like normal romances where it's all about the spice and, oh, I'm attracted to you and you're attracted to me. Like, there still is emotional weight and emotional substance to the couple. I just say that, like, it timeline wise, realistically, it's happening within a week, even though you do have that emotional connection and that emotional plot between them, like romance between them, where they work together to like overcome their issues with each other. It just realistically happens within like a week or whatever. But anyway, so I do suggest you guys check it out. Jessica Ashley, her series, the Coastal Hope series, starting with, I can't remember the name of it. Why can't I remember the name of it? Pages of Promise. Pages of Promise is book 1, and then Searching for Peace is book 2. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below if you have read it. If not, go check it out. I'll have a link in the description for this. So this is still from my review of Searching for Peace. There's a couple more topics that I didn't touch on. So I really wanted to emphasize the way that she handled the grief about the grandmother. So in Andy's case, she lost her actual grandmother, and in Elijah's case, he lost like a grandmother figure. And so there was a lot of different lines and things that they talked about and spoke on that really hit really close to home. Losing my own grandmother, there were several times where I almost cried. Her writing is actually really good. There are several times, not just with that, but in general, there were several times where there was really good lines that really was like hit hard. The Christian themes are also really important. There's a lot of like Andy making a lot of mistakes in her past, and so there was a lot of relatability to that, where she doesn't feel worthy, and like sometimes we as Christians know logically that God forgives us, but sometimes it's hard to let go of our sin, and even though we're going to continue to sin because we're all human, and feeling worthy again and running from your mistakes. And like in her case, she had to like face a town and face her mistakes and stuff like that. There's a lot of like Elijah, she's dealt with the military like veteran stuff in the previous book, and she handles it really, really well. I love the dynamic between Lance, Elijah, and Michael, the 3 military guys who are working together. In Elijah's case, he actually deals with a lot of PTSD, and I really, really loved how she handled it. It was very well done, so realistically, and there was one scene in particular that was gut-wrenching and emotional, and I cried. Like, I had tears in my eyes. It was so intense, but it was handled in such a realistic way, and I love that kind of stuff because it brings attention to what real people are going through. And it also led emotional weight behind the characters helping each other through their trauma. And it also, I love in both of the books, one thing that she brings out in kind of a subtle way is like God's planning and timing and stuff like that, which is amazing. And it's different, but I like, at least for me, because maybe I don't read a whole lot of like actual Christian stuff, but I like the way the characters pray and they go to God and stuff. But at the same time, you have Elijah, like I like the realism of sometimes he gets angry and he knows that he wants to deal with things in a way that a Christian shouldn't, but he can't help it, and his temper gets away from him. And so I really love that. I like the small town, and they're building like the town characters and the small town vibes. The lighthouse that was in book 1 is still in this one, so the lighthouse is starting to feel like its own character at this point. And I feel bad because the lighthouse is always the thing to get damaged, so that's a thing too. Poor lighthouse. But yeah, I just wanted to add in those points because those were some of the things that she also did really good. And like I said, Elijah, his story and the military veteran stuff and how she dealt with the PTSD was so good. I did feel like, again, the ending was rushed and it was all wrapped up nicely in a bow, which means that the PTSD was kind of like, and also the other Andy and her stuff, it was all like, okay, it's just fine. Which in real life, like sometimes those things carry over. Even like we don't really get happy endings. We won't until, you know, the end of the world and God comes back and, you know, all that stuff. But like, you know, in real life, you know, you keep continuing to grow and to overcome your past and different things like that. So it's just like, it wasn't realistic in a way, but before that, like it was dealt with really, really well. So I just wanted to add that. And in the meantime, if you liked this video, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more writing and reading videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And in the meantime, if you like my review of Searching for Peace by Jessica Ashley, then check out my review of book 1, Pages of Promise by Jessica Ashley. I'll have it here so you guys can go check out my review and get all my thoughts on that one and why it was a 4-star read compared to this one, which was 4.5 stars.